Ukraine Media Center current form. It's been 10 years of the war, and today is day 435 of the full-scale invasion of our homeland by Russian aggressor. And traditionally, I want to thank the representatives of all the mass media who tell the world the truth about this war and this heroic resistance. Our brief schedule for today is as follows. At 1 p.m. we will be talking about the current situation in the energy market of Ukraine. Joining us in the studio will be Alexander Harchenko, director at the Energy Industry Research Center. And at 2 o'clock we will have panel discussion during which we will discuss the consequences of war in nature and biospheric reserves and national parks. And joining us in the studio right now is Taras Kremin, Commissioner for the Protection of the State Language, and we will be talking about the way Ukraine adhered to the language law in 2022. Please, Mr. Taras. Good afternoon, dear Ukraine, dear representatives of the mass media. I want to thank Ukrinform Information Agency for this opportunity to cover the peculiarities of implementation of the law on function of Ukrainian language as the state language. Well, this is our third summary, and I think that year 2022 became a breaking point in terms of consolidation of society, implementation of the law, and unification of Ukrainian society around our values. Thanks to our armed forces, 2022 just looked the way we wanted it to look. We had counteroffensive. There was a lot. It was filled with bravery, and I hope this trend will be preserved for the future. I want to say that the language issue was political, and there were a lot of political statements, legislative initiatives related to it, and it's good that it lost its status back on the 24th of February last year, because this is when Ukraine has understood what is the real aggressor who was approaching Kyiv, and the circumstances or those events in Bucha, Irpin, Mykolaiv, Izum, and other cities were the expression of genocide of Ukrainian people. I want to thank our international partners who support us, but one of the ways of consolidation of Ukrainian people is protection of our values. And on the 24th of February, Ukrainian language became the marker of identity, and everybody, or almost everybody, realized what it is to communicate in Ukrainian, to speak Ukrainian, stop communicating in the language of the occupier. What is it to defend their rights in different areas of social life? How to explain to children what Ukrainian language is, what is Ukrainian language, for example, for government officials who were mostly speaking another language, specifically in the south and east. So this summary, it shows the condition of implementation of the law on language, the analysis of operation of the national language in the 10 spheres of life. There is a specific section for linguicide of Ukrainian language in the occupied areas. We paid attention to the international cooperation of our secretariat, then the issue of regional language policy, and what's also important, we pay attention to the sociological research that demonstrate revolutionary spark of interest to Ukrainian language, to transition to Ukrainian language and to using it in everyday life. The main trend of this summary and the last year is the drastic growth of support of Ukrainian language, cardinal increase of its use in public sphere, in private communication, everywhere. On the 24th of February 2022, our secretariat was in the working places. We were making decisions in what format we are about to work, so the relevant orders for transition to the martial law were obvious for us. I want to thank our team who was working incessantly on communication of international community and provision of information regarding the condition of implementation of the law. There were 2 waves of implementation of the document last year. It included explanations, providing information about Ukrainian language implementation, language courses, international cooperation, and so on and so forth. We received 2,846 applications from the citizens of Ukraine from all over Ukraine back in 2022. So that was the number of reports as to violation of the language law. We said that the leaders by number of reports which contained the notifications of violation of the law was the city of Kyiv and Kharkiv region, from where we received 460 reports. So the smallest number was coming from Luhansk and Kirovograd regions. In some cases the regions are not identified, but so I urge all the citizens of Ukraine to mention the place where you notice the violation of the language law. So the smallest number of reports was coming during March, mostly from central and western parts of Ukraine, and the biggest number was coming in August and July, and it was related to the new wave of information campaign, during which it was reported that from the 16th of July Ukrainian language was becoming mandatory for use in internet, and the amendments to the Code of Ukraine on administrative violations and administrative liability were affected, which resulted in a bigger number of reports. In 189 reports we were reported about the violation of the language law in internet, which meant that certain web resources were not available in Ukrainian language. Also, there were posters in non-state language in Kharkiv and in Kharkiv region, 252 such reports, and in 54 more related to Kyiv. So we insist the local government takes our recommendations, these statistics, into work. There were violations by the local governments of the Ukrainian law. We had some government officials who only partly communicated in Ukrainian, or they were communicating in Ukrainian depending on their mood, for example. So before the 24th of February, we had 152 such violation cases. There were also cases of violation in the sphere of education. We know that the school education was going on in online mode, and in all areas, in the preschool, during school, and higher education, everywhere we were documenting violations of the language law as well. Also in the medical sphere, the Ukrainian citizens were receiving different notices of expertises in non-Ukrainian language. In total, 192 such violation cases, mostly in Kharkiv region and the city of Kyiv. In the same way, there were violations in the sphere of tourism and transport, 16 and 28 respectively. Me, as the commissioner, I had to take a decision to stabilize the level of compliance with the language law in different spheres. I issued an order for certain actions for mitigation of such violation cases. Among the measures of state control in the spheres where we received the most reports on violation is the customer service sphere, the information about goods and services. We received 104 such reports. Then in the sphere of health protection, education, culture, court, all those spheres were covered by us. All the measures of state control got their results. The discrepancies were mitigated and the situation was stabilized. I was talking about government officials, but within the year, among this huge number of violation cases, the violations were identified in a number of cases, about 5% of such cases. The government officials were respectively penalized. They were served a warning, or otherwise they were penalized for 3,400 hryvnias. So if such violations will persist, the amount of penalties will respectively increase. In the court system, the non-state language was used during bringing the court awards. We received 7 reports of such cases, and the state control measures were implemented in 2 such cases. And I want to thank everybody who works in the court system for proper compliance with the language law. About the education, we stated that the language of education should be within the framework of law in effect. It should be Ukrainian language. However, there were statements regarding the update of the school programs, specifically the world literature, and recommendations about exclusion of certain texts of Russian writers. There were discussions a year ago. For the time being, such requirements, they don't come as a surprise, but a year ago they resulted in some discussions, and within last year we received 117 reports on violation of the language law in the sphere of education. It was happening in kindergartens, in the schools, and unfortunately in universities too. In many regions such violations were persistent, but the majority of them were mitigated, so we may state that compared to the last curriculum year, the part of those who switched to Ukrainian language in education grew dramatically. We have no schools for the time being and no communities where the education is provided, education services are provided in non-state language, specifically in South and East. So please consider those figures. They are available in our website. As well as to the universities, we got 154 reports from Kharkiv and Odessa, and among the violations that we identified, they were taking place in certain universities. In some cases, those who were using not state language were finalized. That was the first time in the history of our institution. It was one penalty was imposed on a docent, on a professor of the Aviation Institute. He was penalized in amount of 3,400 hryvnias. So this is the experience that we're getting in protection of the rights of every citizen of Ukraine, including those who were acquiring education services. Yet another sphere where violations were documented were in cultural sphere, for example, in the names of some theaters, for example, in Kharkiv, Mykolaiv, Odessa, or Kyiv, there were words in Russian language, and in the same way there were plays on the stages of such theaters played in Russian language. But in year 2022, the most of the theater collectives refused to use Russian language as the language of their plays, and they updated their statutes along with their names. So now we have Kyiv Academic Theater of Drama named after Lesa Ukrainka. It will never be a Russian drama theater anymore. And in the same way it happened in Kharkiv, Odessa, and Mykolaiv, and I want to thank our colleagues for their proactive pro-Ukrainian stance, and I'm happy this finally happened. At the same time, I want to say that the excursion activities in our museums was going on in non-state language as well. So talking about a non-state language, such excursions were held in non-state language for foreign tourist groups. So the excursions were held in English and German languages, which is not actually a violation in case of a preliminary agreement and proper request. Well, there were also a number of movies issued in non-state languages. Not too much of them, but actually 156 certificates for the national films were issued, out of which 154 were issued in Ukrainian language. Well, as to the media, it was a key document in 2022 for us. It was for sure because we were regulating both the printed media and TVs, online platforms, and so on. We were among those who took an active stance to amend the media law in the second reading. All of our proposals were taken into account, and it's good that this document received the necessary number of votes in the Parliament of Ukraine, and our opinion is that only in close cooperation between the Parliament and us we will have always balanced and verified and corroborated with European practice and Ukrainian legislative history, legislative acts. So this law is important for us. It works. It reinforces the statute and role of Ukrainian language as the state language. It expands the spheres of application of Ukrainian language and assists to the rights of Ukrainians, supports the rights of Ukrainians to information. So regarding the media, we received 254 reports from the citizens of Ukraine, 64 about TV and radio broadcasts, and 147 for printed media, and 43 from online media. As to book publishing and book dissemination, what I can add that the last year was probably the most difficult one during all the years of independence. So according to the Book Chamber of Ukraine, there were 8,000 names of the books issued in Ukrainian language, twice smaller than the year before in 21, and the total issue amounted to less than 10 million books. Meanwhile, in year 21, such number was thrice more, almost thrice more. There were reports about the violations in this sphere as well from our citizens. So we continue to implement state control measures in the publishing houses who were issuing books in the languages other than Ukrainian. We were writing about that. There was a list of publishing facilities, and we will communicate the consequences of mitigation of those violations to the Ukrainian society. One of the areas where we registered most of the violation is the customer service sphere. We had 1,112 such reports regarding some of the cases. For example, the internet pages of some mass media didn't have start page in Ukrainian language. Also regarding the service sphere, there were 104 cases when the web resources were penalized for absence of this start page. People were using actively the online shops for all kinds of purchases, so the application of the language law resulted in switching of many resources to Ukrainian language as well. In the area of advertising and information, we received more than 142 reports. In the sphere of health protection, we had reports coming from Kyiv, Vinnytsia and Kryvyi Rih, in total number of 92 reports, and I want to thank the Ministry of Health who continues to comply with our recommendations, because one of the elements of this annual document is provision of recommendations to the local and central governments as to the compliance with the law and reinforcing the role of Ukrainian language as the state language. For example, Ministry of Health included the requirement for mandatory use of the Ukrainian language in the healthcare system. As to the issues of regional and central government policy in terms of law application, there were 18 language programs adopted in 2022, and we provided our recommendations to the central government, so we believe such document will emerge this year. But me as the commissioner and my representatives were in active cooperation with regional administrations, with the military governors, mayors of the regional capitals to research and study the condition of compliance with the local language programs. For the time being, there are 44 such programs, including 16 regional level, 16 municipal level, and 12 on the community level. We hope that by the end of this year we will cover all the regions of Ukraine with language programs 100%. We will have relevant meetings in which I will take part with the local governments and municipal councils. As to the transition to the Ukrainian language, the law stipulates that the governments on a regional and central level should assist the implementation of the law. We did everything on our part, and in the spheres of culture, education, we initiated more than 500 locations for mastering of Ukrainian language. The leaders for these spots are Lviv, Kyiv, and Kharkiv, and I hope this dynamic will continue to facilitate the access to the language courses in your community, in your city, in your region. We have an interactive map on our website where you can very conveniently click on the region, understand what is the number of the courses, their location, and how effectively this or that local program works. We continue to transform this interactive map. It will be updated on a regular basis, and the information about the new locations, new activities, new courses, please send everywhere to our email, and we will put it on our interactive map. Another way of expansion of this interactive map is the creation of courses for mastering Ukrainian language as a foreign language. We have an English version of our website. So such information will be updated as well, because millions of our citizens abroad are actively involved in this process. They work with the communities of Ukrainians abroad, and it's good that there is support from the dozens of centers for Ukrainian studies from leading world universities, from Munich, Harvard, Texas, and a number of other universities who were ready to support our initiatives and to continue working on expansion of such network. As to the mandatory attribute of our annual summary, we express the recommendations on an annual basis, and as of the year 2023, the main recommendations are: we ask the Cabinet of Ministers to control the compliance with the international law, to approve the state program for assistance in mastering state language. One of the main components is to support the operation of the state level Ukrainian language courses, and we ask to ensure the translation and publishing in state language international agreements which were not published before. However, they took effect. It's more than 1,000 such documents in total. We are interested in activization of cooperation with the Ukrainians abroad, and we think that it was them who created the conditions to accept the citizens of Ukraine who were internally displaced, who make sure that who ensure the continuous education process for Ukrainian children. But the issue of state language policy in cooperation with our compatriots abroad still remains urgent. We ask the Parliament to identify the priority law which would stipulate the application of the gesture language, which is mentioned which fact is mentioned in the language law, and we need to cover the necessities of those people who use the gesture language, and we ask to update the section on the passport of the citizens of Ukraine in compliance with the Part 1, Article 8 of the Passports of Ukraine. For the time being, there are 2 blank passports: biometric passports and passports of the old form with the blue color, with information about the citizens, the place of issue, where the data is provided in both Ukrainian and Russian language. So we ask to unify and bring those forms in compliance with the language law. Also amend the law on the rights of consumers as to the information of the products for the consumers. Also, we ask the courts, the Supreme Court, local governments, and the founders of scientific periodicals to react to our recommendations too. What I also would like to mention, that the level of compliance with our recommendations in the year 2021, so the most of the recommendations were complied with or complied with in part. So we urge our colleagues to pay more attention to the compliance with the law, which was adopted 4 years ago. As to the priority areas or areas that we identified as priorities, is documenting of the facts of linguicide in the occupied territories. We will also include it in our cases submitted against Russia to the international courts, which in our opinion will have strong perspective. So we documented more than 200 such facts in official communication, document turnover, culture, media, public space. We documented the case of importing Russian books, the burning of Ukrainian books, importing of Russian TV sets. I'm not even talking about the destruction of kindergartens, universities, schools, and murders of civil population, which is a fact of genocide and respectively linguicide. So we will continue to communicate those facts to our colleagues from law enforcement agencies and as well as our international partners. The Security Service of Ukraine initiated, and other law enforcement agencies initiated, a number of cases for such violations upon our reports. We hope that the information as to the facts of linguicide was sent to the Secretariat of the Commissioner for European Justice, for Human Rights, and Minister of Justice to Ukraine. The matter of language policy is the matter of synchronization with the activities of European Federation of National Language Institutes. We became the associated member of this organization, and now in European platforms we are talking not only about the crimes of Russian criminals, Russian occupiers, but we are also say about the facts of linguicides and best language practices. So when we talk about how can we become closer to European language, so the synchronization of our institution with the activities of our European partners is one of the optimal steps which witnesses such growth and approximation. The presidents of all European language institutions reacted to our reports immediately, and they were pressing on their governments to the maximum extent to provide Ukraine with maximum amount of support possible, including weapons and provision of platforms for disseminating the information. The facts of linguicide are documented by and then communicated to our colleagues, and it's good that the leading media, the European and American media, they publish on a weekly basis the materials about the threat to Ukrainian language, culture, and identity. We print such language digests on a weekly basis. They enjoy some popularity, and we hope this information will be of use to our listeners. So thus today's presentation of the language report is in compliance with the law, which stipulates that the Commissioner should provide such summary on peculiarities of implementation of the law, on the operation of Ukrainian language as the state language. I appreciate your attention. I hope the activity of our institution will be supported further on. The more people will be switching to Ukrainian language, there will be less cases of violation of rights of Ukrainian citizens. Glory to Ukraine, glory to the heroes. Mr. Truss, you said that the 5 persons were brought to liability for violation of the law. Well, not so. If I may ask, not about those personalities, but the areas where those people were brought to liability. Well, we don't have any classified information In those cases, they were internet resources which did not have start page in Ukrainian language. There were 70 such facts documented by us in 2022 and 2023. Obviously, there were professors of the universities, the officials of the local governments. So in some cases we impose sanctions such as warning, but if the violations persist, we impose penalties which are being paid to local budgets. This is what I want to emphasize, the local budgets. Well, in all spheres of our life, when you were talking about the violation of the language law, leading positions are taken by Kyiv and Kharkiv regions. So what can you do to mitigate such violations? Well, I cannot remain indifferent to the language situation in the cities of Kyiv and Kharkiv. I see the city of Kharkiv as a heroic city. It stood its ground back in 2014 and it proved its status last year. The death of civil population, destruction of the critical infrastructure, thousands of shellings in no way influenced the bilingual identity of this glorious city. So this dramatic switch into Ukrainian language is one of the premises for consolidation of Kharkiv region and the rest of Ukraine as well. To stabilize the situation, we don't only prepare the relevant recommendations, but I think that the mayor will prepare the local language program and the necessary resources will be allocated from the municipal budget. The Kharkiv region enjoys the least number of language training courses, and I think this situation should be rectified. We are in close cooperation with the university community and the university commissioners who on a volunteer basis help the citizens of Kharkiv to master Ukrainian language is a very important component. Kharkiv University is in active cooperation with the foreign universities, and the sections of Ukrainian language studies will be established in all those universities. Kharkiv implemented one of the first language programs in Ukraine, and for what I know, the municipal funds will be allocated to establish the local training course, which will be working in the territorial communities, not only in the regional capital. It's good for reinforcement of the language stability and to serve as an example for other regions of Ukraine. As to the Kyiv region, 2 months ago, the regional council adopted the language program. There is no such program in the city of Kyiv itself, but there is an intention to develop and to approve it in view of systemic violations which demonstrate the fact of incompliance with the language law. And I want to thank the meticulous Kyivites who react to the captions in the street in non-Ukrainian language that irritates them. Also violations in education area. So I hope that the mayor will take into account all those recommendations. I hope that we will have such language program implemented in Kyiv shortly. Dear colleagues, if you have any questions, please go ahead. Alashershen, Ukrinform, what is the liability for the crime of linguicide? Thank you. Thank you. There is a notion in legal terminology, there are norms of European law for violation of human rights, so we cooperate with the representative of the European Court for Human Rights, Margarita Sokolenko, with the Ministry of Justice and other law enforcement agencies to bring to international liability. We have to first amend the law of Ukraine. In effect, in criminal code, the notion of linguicide are mentioned in certain spheres, but linguicide, unlike genocide is mentioned in criminal law, but linguicide should be added to it. We work actively with the parliament, with the committees, and we count on their compliance with our recommendations. On our hand, what we can do is we can gather and document the facts as the elements which harm the national security and defense. And according to the opinion of the Constitutional Court of Ukraine, which proves the constitutional nature of Ukrainian language, so in their opinion they say it's a threat to the national security and defense. So we base ourselves on this logic. Thank you, Mr. Taras. We know that our armed forces are preparing to counteroffensive. We're sure that it will be successful. So are we ready to enter the deoccupied territories to promote the Ukrainian language there, to make sure the law is complied with? Are we ready to support the people there in this regard? Obviously, we should be preparing for a language counteroffensive, and we should use all the necessary tools which are available to us to make sure that Ukrainian language resumes its operation in all spheres of life. I'm sure that Ukrainian language will sound in Donetsk, Lugansk, Mariupol, Sevastopol, and other cities that suffer loss due to the language occupation. Many people were persecuted for their language. They were suffering for using Ukrainian, but we will continue believing that the year 23 will become a historic year. Thank you very much for joining our broadcast. Thank you for all the information provided. Dear colleagues, do we have any more questions? Roman Kukharuk, Natia Information Agency. Mr. Taras, I'm having two questions to you. What is the destiny of the draft law of Mazerash? So we about the absence of comfort of use, which results from using of national language in trade. And do you have also any encouragements for those who developed the Ukrainian language? Well, we discuss a lot of legislative initiatives by our secretariat, and the draft that you mentioned did not enjoy a lot of support during the meeting of the profile committee. It was not even included in the agenda, and I hope such initiatives will be disappearing, and on contrary there will be more documents or draft laws emerging which will reinforce the role of Ukrainian as the state language. As to the encouragements that you mentioned, it's maybe a task for all the government offices which are involved in this work. Our institution is responsible for protection of Ukrainian language, so within the new opportunities that we discover in ensuring the rights of Ukrainian citizens, obviously we have to support them. There should be some encouragement for publishing houses, and we expect the President of Ukraine to sign a law to popularize reading in Ukrainian language, and I hope more capabilities will be provided to the Institute of the Book. And the matter of Ukrainian language is the key matter. It doesn't require any more discussions, only support, stimuli, and encouragements. Thank you very much. Joining us was Taras Kremin, and our next briefing is at 1300, and we will talk about the power grid of Ukraine. Bear with us, trust in our armed forces, and thank them for this opportunity to have events like this. Glory to Ukraine.